All right, well, welcome back. This week we are going to dive into this 8.3% rule that I've kind of found to be true over most situations working out. This video is a 2D conversation on a 3D, if not 4D situation, meaning, we're going to dive into the income and the variables that we can control when taking over a multifamily property to enhance its cash flow. But at the end of the day, there's real world situations that will make a landlord choose to go and do something different than what I'm suggesting with the 8.3% rule. And they're very valid reasons on why. Some of them could be just short-term cash flow. Other things can be tenants that you're unaware of how they treat the property, if they pay on time, and ultimately if they're a good fit for the community. And so that will change the situation extremely. And I want to note that I'm not going to go into that depth in this video because I just want to go over the 8.3% theory that I've found can help landlords and property managers dissect just the cash on cash return or just the absolute cash flow over 12 months. Let's just focus on the things we can control. I look at it like going into a casino. You have money, and when you are experienced in the casino, specifically blackjack, people can count cards to then help their favor and opportunities to win more than the house. And so the thing we're going to speak on is just one variable outside of many variables on why we would do something regarding rent increase, forcing vacancy, or anything in between. My goal is to help you understand the cash consequences and benefits of deciding whether to keep the tenant, increase rent, or simply have the tenant exit the property with a 30-day notice. We're going to dive into that in this video, and let's get into it. I'm Daniel Bell, Property Manager Dan. I'm a Knoxville property manager that focuses on 200 units as of now, and we're wishing to grow. My goal is to hit 500 units in total management in the next 2 years. If you want to be a part of that, just message below, use the link. Let's get into it. So right now we're going to look at this Excel sheet. We're looking at a 10-unit multifamily. Are going to be all 2-bedroom, 1-baths. This is just a base example. I randomly chose numbers that would be realistic for us to see when first purchasing the property. And so they're all the same units. They are all rented at different prices, and we understand that our market rate is $1,000. So right now we only have 2 people, unit 4 and unit 9, at market rate. And so the question we're trying to go over today is, how do you get everyone to market rate while also being realistic and understanding what decisions can I make and what decisions are best for the property to make as much money in the next 12 months as possible. So I'm going to zoom out. I've built out a couple examples, but we're going to dive into what do I mean by the 8.3% rule. And we're going to scroll down here. Ignore this stuff on the right. So the 8.3% rule is explained like this. If your market rent is $1,000, that means over the next 12 months, if that tenant paid on time, you'd take on $12,000. Now, if we have an underperforming property, or a unit, I should say, that's doing 900, 917, or 950, we want to know what will that look like over the next 12 months. And so if we know we can make 12 grand a month if we are at market rate, and we're only going to make $10,800 a month at $900, so that's 10% below market rate. We know we're not making as much money. That we can all agree on, that we all see that we have a problem and we need to get that unit up to market rate as soon as possible. The funny thing is there's a breaking point where when you move a tenant out that's not at market rate because they do not want to pay that, you will probably have a vacancy. That vacancy is responsibly around 1 month. So 1 month between your current tenant leaving that has been paying $900 and your next tenant paying $1,000 4 weeks later. That's a pretty good timeline if your property manager or landlord can continually keep it under 4 weeks. I know that in real life, sometimes it goes past that. 8.3% rule allows us to see if we've moved this tenant out, assuming month 1 we collected this rate, and then month 2 kicked them out and then brought them to market rate, we would basically end up with potentially a lower number than if we would have kept them in the entire time over 12 months, because you lose 1 month of income. And so the question is what rent rate do we give a 30-day notice or request them to pay market rate, or which tenants do we not request that, as it's not worth the risk? And that is when tenants are 8.3% within market rate or closer. So someone paying at this $917 or closer to $1,000, there's actually no need to force a vacancy in that situation, because you are making the same amount of money, $11,000, if you were to bring it to market rate and have 1 month of vacancy because you had to have the current tenant move out and your new tenant move in. You would end up at $11,000. So the person paying $917 or more is actually going to bring you the same amount of revenue as the person paying at market rate for 11 months. So 12 months at $917 is the same thing as 11 months at $1,000. Now, this is where I say it's a 2D conversation. We are not talking about, well, is the tenant that we got for $1,000 better qualified for the rent in the first place? They were obviously someone we chose as a property manager or landlord, so we got to choose that person over inheriting. And so that can bring a ton of value. But while you're working on this 10-unit portfolio, as we see above, there are bigger problems than the people that are paying within 8.3% market rate, assuming they're paying on time. The $925 in this theory, we would not touch. Obviously, the $1,000 we would not touch. The $900 would be where we would have a conversation. Same with $850, same with $750. We would hold and keep renting to the $975, similar with $1,000, similar with the $950. We would once again have a conversation with unit 2 and obviously unit 1. And so then conversation goes into which ones do we do first. Obviously, the least paying tenants have the biggest margin that we can recuperate by increasing rent. So let's go back down, just review this one more time. So if someone pays $1,000 for 11 months because they had 1 month of vacancy, we're going to make $11,000 in revenue on that property. Someone does $950 for 12 months, as in they're an inherited tenant that we never asked to increase, or they had made the self-decision to exit. The 12 months being, we would make $11,400. So that's $400 more that year, which it's real cash. So $400 more that year is solid. And so it's not just a simple conversation of getting everyone up to $1,000, keep moving forward. Some landlords are okay with that, and that's totally fine. But there are ways to strategically make more cash over a 12-month period than to just bump everyone to market rate, because there are also variables that you cannot control, which would be the tenant saying no and leaving, refusing, and going into a situation where you're poking a bear that doesn't need to be poked, like this $950 or even arguably the $917, which is your break-even point. Again, 2D conversation, that brainstorming that you're having while watching this video, you'll realize, hopefully that's giving you an education compared to you arguing with me over real life variables we all know that exist. This is a great example of just 16.6% rule would be the theory of, if you're not as confident in getting somebody in 4 weeks, these are your break-even numbers if it took 8 weeks to fill that vacancy. And so your numbers drop in what you're willing to take on because that vacancy is larger. And so keeping the current tenants in is more important, which means people paying 16.6% within market rate is now appropriate to keep compared to a stricter rule of 8.3% within market rate. I'm going to zoom out now and we're gonna go over a couple different income statements that could happen. And I have them colored here for a reason. Let's look at this one. So this is where we are gonna assume we lose on every single person we try to bump to market rate. That is a starting conversation where we probably would not get that unlucky, but we have to assume the worst case scenario when we do things. And so that first month, if we cleared out every tenant and requested them to go to market rent or please exit the property, assuming everyone's on 30-day or month-to-month leases, that also is a huge variable that makes this a lot more complex. But typically, a lot of times these underperforming properties, the tenants are on month to months. And so you do have a lot of flexibility with what you can do and attack. And so there are times where a landlord simply just wants to get to market rate. And I'm going to show you how that actually can produce less cash over the first 12 months of the property. So the first month you collect rent, which is the old rent, and your total income is $8,950. And then you basically give 30-day notices on that month one. And then you have a vacancy the following month on all properties in this example that are not at market rate. So even the 900, 700, 950, and so on. So your cash flow is an all-time low for month two because you're sacrificing for the long-term win, which can be a win and it can be a loss. It just all depends. There's so many things we could talk on. I would say one positive variable here is that you get to choose all your future tenants and vet them probably better than the last landlord, which will in result provide you tenants that hopefully keep up the property better, pay on time, and don't get behind on their balances. However, there's also a huge loss in that current cash flow. And even more importantly, how confident are you that you can find that many well-qualified tenants in 4 weeks for, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units? So there's only so many trophy bucks that go by in the woods every 4 weeks. And how many of those can you bag and make them be your tenant? It's somewhat difficult to find that many well-qualified tenants in a market that quickly. That may be more of a situation that takes longer than 4 weeks in the first place. But back to the 2D conversation, let's say you do figure that out. Now you're perfect on all month 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on to 12. Well, your total income for that year, because you basically renovated and stabilized this property in less than a month, you would think you'd make more money than the following examples, but I'm about to show you the 8.3% rule and how it actually can make you almost $2,000 more in a year, which is quite a bit of cash flow. That's a whole 2 months of a market rate unit in this example. So again, let's start at 8.3% rule. So 8.3% of $1,000 is $83, of course. So $1,000 minus 83. Minimum rent requirement to keep somebody is $917. And anyone that cannot get to at least 917 or is at currently above 917, we're going to do the same variable where they all left. They decided to leave. And so somebody at 925, we are not going to talk to them and try to push them up. We're going to keep them as is. 700, too low. We requested them to get to market rate. They decided not to. They moved out. We had 4 weeks of vacancy, and then we filled it with a market rate tenant. 950, again, within our guidelines, we allowed them to stay, and we continued to rent to them. Same with this one. 750, too low, past the 8.3% rule. We requested them to pay market rate. They said no, they left, took us 4 weeks, found the tenant, and so on. This tenant stayed, and then we did not request that. So the first month we made $8,975, and then the second month we brought in $5,775. So a significantly more cash flow than the second month if we were to hard push everyone and try to flip this property in less than 4 weeks. And then you'll see that we make less cash flow every single month than our example one with, perfect market rate, but then we end up with more money at the end. And so I did find one variable that was wrong. That one was 900. So let's just do that across the board. Apologize about that. So now again, the market rent will be the same. I did that mistake right here. Give me 1 second. So month one, we all square up and get 8,950 to keep this kind of scientific example accurate. And so we bring in, annually speaking, with the 8.3% rule. Again, tons of variables, I understand. But if we can perform at these numbers and look at this with maybe black and white without putting the color on the paint, we can learn that doing things over time with a standard of that 8.3% rule will allow us to make the same, if not more, cash return in the 12 months than if we were to just blow it out of the park and request everyone to exit the property for us to get the property up to market rent. Again, tons of variables, whether the property needs to be renovated. That could be a big reason why this example one, where we force market rate all at once, is actually a better decision based on, well, we need to renovate these units. It's best to get as many as we can, and then we will rent them afterwards. This could be a valid plan. That's all I'm saying. But for a property that we're working on, which is just the rent is low and we're not improving anything significantly past better paint, regular turnover items, then I would not be taking example one into effect as the plan. So again, 8.3% rule, we can see cash flow wise, we did another 1,250 in total. And then I'm going to show you the in between, what happens when you do this over time. So the delay can also create less cash flow, but still better than forcing it all to happen all at once in example one. So example three is 8.3% rule, but not doing it all at once. So the 8.3% rule basically said that if a tenant was paying in this situation $917 or more, we would keep them, and everyone else we were going to say to pay market rent or to exit the property. And those tenants decided to leave, as I'm trying to keep all of this similar. And so we did 1, 2, 3, 4 turnovers in the second month, where you may want to do this a little bit more gradually. And so this third example just shows you, or the loss you get at the end of the year compared to doing it all at once. But the benefit is, when you see this monthly cash flow right here, our cash flow never really dips as hard. And so it's really about what can you afford here will dictate which one out of the 3 that you choose to do. I really like to start the conversation with multifamily. I would say stabilization of that multifamily with this concept, and then we break into the specific variables we are dealing with at the property and the tenant level, and then we build a better plan. So this is kind of just like step one from a mile-high view. Which one makes more sense to us? This one would happen in a situation where we have to renovate the property. This one would happen where a landlord does not care as much about the instant loss in cash flow, but obviously better than this situation. And then this one is a more gradual way with even less risk, as we only ask one tenant at a time to either come to market rent or vacate the property. And so doing it one at a time allows your portfolio to keep consistent with cash flow and not dip as aggressively. But at the end of the day, because you delayed that vacancy, we had less months where we were getting market rate and more months where we were getting their old rent. And that added up to actually be a loss. And so we only made $111,350 compared to $112,200. So that's almost $1,000 lost by delaying it. But the benefit was our overall cash flow per month never dropped below that 8,250. And so ultimately, it's kind of like apples and oranges. It can just depend on what you like in your situation. So I just want to end this video with two things that we learned. Number one, current rent is lower than 8.3%. We know in theory we have more risk in keeping than increasing rent to market rate or forcing a vacancy, so we take action immediately with a 30-day notice unless lease is signed at 91.7% to 100% of market rent. And then a slower dip of vacancies saves cash flow but costs more annually to do it. So from a mile high perspective when you're reviewing properties, and hopefully it kind of keeps the stress off when you purchase something of this size, and it gives you a kind of an instant roadmap to take action when you do close on that property. You know, okay, I can ask for market rate, I can keep the rent the same, or I can try to do a little bit in between, or I can just try to have tenants leave and then fill it at market rate. This gives you a real world number example on an Excel sheet that shows you how to do that properly at all three roads. So thank you. Again, I'm a property manager in Knoxville, Tennessee. Please share, please hit the subscribe button and the bell to get notified. I'm posting these videos weekly as much as possible. Obviously work comes first, so I get behind a little bit, but I'm always trying to show people, how to manage properties better. And I think that when I first got started in property management, I really did think that, let's just get everything to market rent because you're just losing money every month anyway. So it's the best option. And now being 3 years in the industry, I've learned that there's kind of a specific road for every type of investor, and it's not always about getting market rate immediately at all units. And there is real risk in trying to do that all at once. You can create a cash deficit in your cash flow that second month because you have so many vacancies. So, comment below what you've learned. Comment below anything you want to argue with me on, because I don't want to say that this is like a law to follow, but it's certainly an interesting thing that I found over the last couple years and have started to really implement with our current landlords. And it allows them to see like how we make the decisions that we make, and it makes them feel more comfortable at the end of the day. So that's why I wanted to put this video out. And so as always, rent is due. We'll see you next week.